We are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. In 1947, the Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen warned that communism is not just an economic system. It is a complete philosophy of life, or it seeks to be anyway. It seeks to control the inner life as well as the economy. And he was right. It dominates everything. The results of history speak for themselves. Socialism is much the same, though the end goal of socialism is always to usher in communism. And democratic socialism just means that you voted for it. At first, anyway. We're at the first stage now in New York City, openly, and we will have to see where it goes from there. Democrats kept their hold on several blue states in elections this week and made some gains. Exit polling shows that economics was the driving factor. So how do we fight this? Where is the disconnect? What can we do now and down the road? We are going to talk about all of this in episode 518 of the In the Tank podcast. Welcome to the In the Tank podcast, you guys. No stinger there. My goodness, Jim, you are messing up on us. Very disappointed. I am Linnea Lueken, your host, and we also have Jim Lakely, Vice President and Director of Communications at the Heartland Institute, Sam Karnick, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and Chris Talgo, Editorial Director and Socialism Research Fellow, also at the Heartland Institute, and also Ian Tang, Communications Intern, also at the Heartland Institute. We are all here. We're excited to get into it today, you guys. No big surprises this week, unfortunately. So, what are our opening reactions to this week's cluster?
Well, Linnea, one little bit of news. So Nancy Pelosi just announced that she's going to be retiring from Congress, and that's the end of an era. Wow, I can't believe it. I guess, Chuck Schumer is going to be following in her footsteps here pretty soon. So I think, we are seeing the old guard of the Democratic Party finally call it quits.
Yep. It is kind of bizarre. I thought that she would definitely be clinging to that power all the way until the end, but
to the end. She's 80. Is she 85? I think she's 85 years old, for crying out loud. That's the end, for Pete's sake. Oh, and thanks for being on the pod, doggy.
No, I thought she's like immortal at this point.
She could be. Well, she's certainly a lot wealthier than she was when she came into Congress. So, it's good to see our public servants being able to retire in such wealth and luxury. They deserve it.
Yeah. It's, everyone's a little bit subdued this week because it is unfortunate, though not surprising, that Democrats held a bunch of Democrat areas. But before we get started today, you guys, as always, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like the video, and remember that sharing it also helps to break through some of YouTube's suppression, or even just leaving a comment helps too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. Okay, so I want to jump right into it. We're not going to spend too much time dawdling here because our opening is, and our first topic are pretty much, and our second topic, pretty much all about New York City, because I think it is one of the more interesting victories for the far left, honestly. So Zohran Mamdani's speech was a little dark. It was quite gloating and a little bit angry, weirdly, even though he won, to the point that a lot of Democrats in the media, including and especially Jones, expressed a little bit of discomfort over it. So we have some clips for it. We can pause it at intervals and discuss some of what he says, but he's got some real moments in there that are pretty incredible. If we have the clips or not. Anyway.
The sun may have set over our city this evening, but as Eugene Debs once said, I can see the dawn of a better day for humanity.
Go ahead and pause it real quick.
I wish Andrew Cuomo...
Pause it. Sam Karnick, who is Eugene Debs?
Yes, he was a communist from the very beginning of the 20th century who was a union leader. And I do think that it's interesting, as you point out, as you indicate, that he would mention Eugene Debs at the very beginning of his speech. And I have some thoughts about this, which I could just give right now or wait till later, because I think it is significant. I'll do it now then, since I haven't heard any objections.
Do it now, because we're not going to come back to this clip. So when it's fresh, let's go.
I think the thing about him mentioning Debs indicates to me that, or I suspect that this did not come from Mamdani himself, that it came from one of his aides and speechwriters and so forth, that the contingent of people that is around any elected official. And it seems to me that this is very much sort of a Joe Biden situation, where it's the opposite of the age situation, where he's very young, very inexperienced. He doesn't know much about anything, and he's going to be relying very strongly, I think, on his aides to run things and to present him to the public. And I think that is going to be very interesting to watch how this plays out, because I don't think that this person is particularly in control of things.
Yeah. Not sure if I totally agree with you on that one, Sam, because I think he's smarter and probably a bit more well-read than we might think, just based on how well he's been able to shift character so well over the last, decade or whatever that he's been in politics or in, community organizing or whatever it is that he does, right?
Could be. I think that this is, it reminds me of the movie, The Candidate, that starred Robert Redford in the early 1970s. And he's a very charismatic person who doesn't really have any original ideas. And certainly no idea that Mamdani has presented so far as original. And what happens is that ultimately he does get elected because he's very charismatic and very exciting, and people are tired of the situation. They're tired of the present situation, and so they want change. And then he gets elected. I guess I shouldn't give away the ending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you watch it, you'll see that it's a case where person doesn't necessarily know what they're planning to do, what they're going to do. They have plans and ideas, but implementing them is a lot harder than you may think. And so I suspect that this is going to be sort of a chaotic situation.
I think so. I just want to point out real quick, Scott Clay, for once, that was not my dog barking her brains out in the background. So that is mine. Slander. Yeah. All right.
No, it was a misplaced compliment.
Yes. we can play the clip.
I wish Andrew Cuomo only the best in private life. But let tonight be the final time I utter his name.
Okay, I want to pause it there though, because that is maybe the weirdest thing he says in the entire speech. It really struck me when I heard it. It's tonight will be the final name I'll have ever uttered his name is a bizarre thing to hear in a modern setting. It reminds me, what jumped to my head right away actually is the the taboo that exists in a ton of different cultures around the world about saying the name of the dead, where, you know, for most of those cultures, it's usually only for a few months or a few years after someone dies. You're not supposed to say their name because in their superstition, saying the person who's deceased's name makes it so that they rise against you and like attack you as a spirit, you know. I don't think it's an Islamic custom, but it struck me right away when he said that it's like a weirdly curse-like thing to declare about someone, that you hope that you never say their name again, as if Andrew Cuomo is dead and gone. and like it's I don't know, there were layers there, and a lot of people aren't doing very much analysis on it. But I thought it was interesting.
I hear what you're saying, Linnea, but I also think that it was a message that the old guard is gone.
Yeah.
And Cuomo represented the old Democratic Party. And I think that Mamdani is trying to say, listen, we're not even going to say that these people exist anymore. We are going to erase them from history, just like a lot of, you know, socialist regimes tend to do.
Yep.
This was Mamdani's way of saying, this is the party of me and AOC now, especially in New York. So New York Democrats, it doesn't belong to the Cuomos anymore. You know, look, his father, Mario Cuomo, was governor for a long time. It was, you know, one of those dynastic families, but on the left, like the Bushes. And that's exactly what this declaration was. I wasn't actually surprised by it. I thought the way he phrased it was, as you said, Linnea, a little odd, but
yeah,
that's the message.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I would like to add that I thought it's the exact thing that he needs to say. Like, this is going to be a little controversial, but to me, this is like Donald Trump saying that, like, Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, you're all fired. And like Mamdani, I think, like, it's no surprise that he's like the most like anti-establishment figure in this whole election series, right? So I think it's exactly the thing that he would say to energize his base, and I saw it coming already. Like, it's very villain-like. It's like giving very like Gotham vibe, but that's exactly who he is, and that's exactly what he's going to say.
Yeah, and both major political parties go through this from time to time. Sam, is being an old man like me on this, you know, remembers that the rise of Ronald Reagan meant the end of the Rockefeller Republican Nixon wing of the party. The rise of MAGA and Donald Trump meant the end of the Mitt Romney part of the party, at least, and it's declarative. You win elections, and that's the people giving the party itself over to a new generation or a new viewpoint and all that kind of stuff. So same thing goes with the Democratic Party for sure.
Yep.
Jim, but I would say one difference is that I think Donald Trump at least tried to extend a hand, an olive branch, to some of those disaffected Republicans like Jeff Flake and such, and those they chose to reject him. It seems as if Mamdani wants to eliminate and erase Cuomo from the political scene altogether.
Well,
and that's consistent with communists, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a long lament, and the younger you are, the more you think this, that we live under a uniparty. And for better or for worse, the socialism and the communism of Mamdani and AOC is not a uniparty. It's a definite choice.
That's part of the... And Jim, your point there is exactly correct. And it's part of the stuff that I want to talk about a little bit later. So hold on to that, because it's part of it. I think we can get back to the clip. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth it to go through it like this.
As we turn the page on a politics that abandons the many and answers only to the few. We won because New Yorkers allowed themselves to hope that the impossible could be made possible. And we won because we insisted that no longer would politics be something that is done to us. Now it is something that we do. An agenda that will freeze the rents for more than 2 million rent-stabilized tenants. Make buses fast and free. And deliver universal childcare across our city.
So there was, I put this clip together, and so that was the policy part of his speech, which I think might be worth getting into here. You know, he's promising all of these free things, which New York City cannot afford. But The people of New York City want them. They think that free buses they're deluding themselves. Free buses are going to be rolling drug dens and homeless shelters, period. And they will not run on time. There will be all sorts of problems. There's no way that he can deliver on this. He can try, but it's not going to be a success.
Well, he's also going to have the cooperation of the New York governor, Kathy Hochul. And it's kind of strange because Kathy Hochul chose not to endorse him until the very, very last second, in which he then, came on stage and was, hugging him and, praising him. I also find it interesting that Chuck Schumer refused to endorse him, and Hakeem Jeffries did at the basically at the last minute as well. Not exactly a rigging endorsement by any means. So, Zoran Mondami, he is the mayor of New York City, but he's going to have to get the cooperation of the governor and the city council. And a lot of the things that he's saying that he's going to do, he cannot just solely do on his own. So it's going to be, I think a fight to see what actually does and doesn't get done. But it looks like he has a ton of momentum on his side, and the people of New York, I mean, they made their voice heard. So it's almost there's a part of me that almost wants him to just go forth with all these things to just see how bad it is, and then hopefully we can a couple of years from now say, look, told you so.
He's in a great position though to just be able to blame the establishment for him not being able to go forward on his promises that he knows that he can't uphold, right? Like, because all he has to say is, look, I wanted to get you free buses, but the state, all these different departments said no. And it's because they're entrenched with the establishment and blah, blah, blah. Easy.
Well, but actually the state
Linnea,
said,
that doesn't work.
But the state said no because they're $30 billion in debt. I did some research this morning about the New York State and New York City finances. They're a mess. They are such a mess. They are, bringing up huge deficits. They are borrowing billions per year. You can't keep doing that. Like Margaret Thatcher said, eventually you run out of other people's money. So he's not coming into a situation in which New York City has a $30 billion budget, surplus that he can just go and spend. New York City is already in really, really, really bad shape. As we've seen over the past few years, the successful, profitable businesses are leaving. The successful people are leaving. And what he's going to be left with is a declining population that is not going to be able to pay for the things that he's promising.
Yeah, he's not going to have a strong argument that, it was they stopped me. That's not good. You said you would do it. You said you would do it. You didn't say, I will do it if Kathy Hochul cooperates, or I will do it if the city council cooperates. You said you would do it. And that is going to be a very strong argument against him. And I think what Chris is building on what I said earlier, this is just going to lead to chaos. That's what it's going to do. The problem that they have is the chaos is not coming, or is not going to arrive under Eric Adams. It's going to arrive under Mamdani. And he's going to be responsible for it, and he's going to be held responsible for it. He will, if this happens, if it plays out the way both Chris and I seem to think it will, what you'll have is Mamdani will have a reputation like David Dinkins as an absolute pathetic failure.
Look, the proposal or the promise to freeze rent. I mean, New York has a housing crisis, not because of it's because of too much government intervention and things like rent control and things like that. I mean, there are study after study after study shows this. I know he says that because it's to appeal to his biggest block of supporters, which are young people and immigrants into New York City who arrive and find it very difficult to live or find a place to live in a closet for, $5,000 a month. But putting aside the fact that any municipality should be able to freeze rent, which is private property owned by others, putting that crazy thought aside, it is going to lead to an even bigger housing crisis in New York City than they already have, because this has been tried. Every time government tries to manipulate real estate, property values and rentals and all that stuff, it always gets worse. San Francisco is a great example of that. New York City is already a good example of that, and it's only going to get worse now.
An economist in the 1940s said that there's never been any better way of destroying a city than rent control, other than bombing. And then in this century, recently, a Vietnamese economist said, no, he's wrong. Rent control is worse than bomb. And he's right.
Well, Jim,
you can look at the pictures.
yeah, and Jim, you mentioned young people, so I have to jump in. And I would like to say that, yeah, like talking about the buses first, I did some research, and then the whole thing is going to cost like around $600 million. So just like what Chris said, New York is already 30 million debt. I don't know how you're going to get $600 million, especially all the millionaires are fleeing New York right now because of the tax that's coming. And then also, I would like to kind of play devil's advocate right now. Because New Yorkers, like one of my best friends from New York, and then their rent is insane. Like his family can't even afford to have a garage in their house, can't even afford to rent the garage for their cars. And so like, I think when people are in desperation, they could care less about what economic theories work. They just want to hear what politicians say that actually appeals to them instead of being lectured on economic theories. And I think that's what Zoran, or how do you pronounce his name? Zoran did so well.
That's a really interesting point. And I've been watching a lot of coverage on all the networks, in the days since the election. And one of the things that a lot of New Yorkers said was, at least he offered something. And that obviously, is easy for us to sit here and like almost like laugh at. But then when I think, okay, so was Cuomo on the stump talking about, the affordability crisis? Not really. He was talking more about the crime crisis and these other things. But then when you look at the exit polls, and I know we'll do that later, those were so low on voters' minds in this election. I know we'll get into this, but the affordability problem was at the top of voters' minds across the country in the places where elections were held on Tuesday. And Zoran Mandami, although I think that his so-called solutions will make the problem 10 times worse, it's easy for people to listen to those solutions and think, oh, well, let's give it a shot. It can't be worse than it is now, or at least he's proposing something. So that's something that I think over the next year or so, politicians of all sides, because the mainstream Democrats, they're going to have to come up with something as well, and the Republicans obviously on their side too, to address this.
It's important to remember that this election was between two Democrats, basically. The Republicans didn't have anything going on in here. Slee was not a serious candidate. And so what this election was all about, and it was who's going to run the Democrat Party. It's not about who's going to run New York City. Nobody's going to run New York City except into the ground. So, and either one of them would have been bad. It's just that I think Mamdani will be much worse than even Cuomo would have been. But this is all about what Democrats are up to. And they're going to own this. They're going to own it good and hard. And if things don't go the way they're expected to go, the way they expect them to go, and the way the voters expected them to go, then it's going to be rough going for them. And the party will have to change once more. So this, to me, is not just a city that's going to be in chaos. It's a party that's already in chaos.
Sam, I predict that I predict that they're gonna blame everyone else. They're gonna blame Trump. They're gonna blame the federal government. They're gonna blame the state. They're gonna blame Hochul. They're gonna blame the city council. They're gonna say, we've got the solutions, but they just won't get on board with these solutions. So the question in my mind is, will this in 4 years from now make New Yorkers double down and say, you know what, we got to get a socialist governor. Hey, let's just put AOC in the White House, and she'll do everything from the nation's capital, make everything a great socialist utopia here in the United States of America. That could happen. That very well could.
Chris, if you want to know how that's going to work, just ask President Harris. Well, you could blame everything you want on the opposition, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
It scares me because I saw President Trump on Fox News yesterday do a long interview about this, and unfortunately, he is denying that there's an affordability crisis. He's saying, no, prices are going down. Prices are great. The economy's great. And
he's
wrong about that. He is wrong about that. That's what I'm
we
saying.
will
Is
want
that
to get to we will want to get to Trump. We want to get to all that.
We will get to
but-
that.
sure? Okay.
But
Let's-
right now, I think Mamdani's speech is emblematic of this problem, which is that the Democrat Party is in chaos. It is moving in a direction that is only going to create further trouble for it. So I think that's what the one side of the story that New York is all about the Democrats. When we bring in the Republicans, when we bring in some plausible Republicans, then we'll have something to talk about. And I think, and we should do that.
Play more video?
Yeah.
All right.
This new age will be defined by a competence and a compassion that have too long been placed at odds with one another. We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
Yeah,
Now-
that's chills. That's
I
a
know.
cold right up your spine, right?
That's at the chill up my spine for sure.
Oh, no.
For sure. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's just fine. All right, we keep going.
Together, we will usher in a generation of change. And if we embrace this brave new course, rather than fleeing from it, we can respond to oligarchy and authoritarianism with the strength it fears, not the appeasement it craves. After all, if anyone can show a nation betrayed by Donald Trump how to defeat him, it is the city that gave rise to him. And if there is any way to terrify a despot, it is by dismantling the very conditions that allowed him to accumulate power.
This is the most communist speech. I've listened to this a few times now.
Yeah.
And now running through it and letting it run for, a little bit longer. This is Bolshevik stuff, man.
Yeah.
This
It's just
is-
straight up Bolshevik stuff.
And when these plans and plots fail, because they have failed everywhere they have been tried throughout history of the 20th century and unfortunately in the 21st century, the playbook never changes. And as Chris and Sam were talking about it, I'm like, if this fails, it's the fault of the kulaks. It is going to be the fault of everybody who's not enough with the party. And if you do ask Grok what I mean when I talk about the kulaks in the Bolshevik Revolution, and you'll see something pretty horrifying. And he's already setting this up. When just that little stretch we just played, I heard echoes of Barack Obama when he talked about change. This is really the Barack Obama message from 2007 and 2008, taken to its, you could say, extreme, but also to its logical end and conclusion. And this is where we are now as a country, where the Democrat Party, and again, this was Zoran Mamdani and by extension AOC and also Bernie Sanders putting the flag down for straight up socialism as the platform and direction of the Democratic Party from here on out. And part of me thinks, why not? Why not try that? Considering that, in the 2024 election, Donald Trump was able to peel off a lot of, disaffected Democrats. We're just getting farther and farther apart between the two parties in this way. It's becoming less of a uniparty now because the Democrats are going so far left. But that's the most Bolshevik speech given by a politician in the United States since the early 20th century, when you could get away with that stuff, where you can't get away with it now, since Eugene Debs, as a matter of fact. All right.
So, Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up. New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant. So hear me, President Trump, when I say this. To get to any of us, you will have to get through all of us.
And when he says Donald Trump, he doesn't just mean Donald Trump.
No.
He means all of his supporters too. He means you, Ian, with that MAGA hat behind you in the background. You were talked to in that speech. There you go, buddy. But you need to pick out your enemy. So he's already picked out his enemies on which he's going to be blaming all of his failures, and with quite strident rhetoric as well. So,
all right, guys. Well, we're continuing on the Mamdani topic here. I wanted to pull up this article that the BBC published in the wake of his win, and I wanted to show you guys this thing because it is very funny. It's titled, Mamdani Seals Remarkable Victory, but Real Challenges Await. But it's not the article itself. It's a puff piece, whatever. It's the BBC. But the most notable part is this graphic near the top. That's a quick facts. If you click on the arrow to go to the quick facts tab there, where it tells you when he was born, what he's famous for, political views is the part that I want to highlight. He describes himself as a democratic socialist, which has no clear definition, but essentially means giving a voice to workers, not corporations. Yeah, BBC,
Right.
That's all it means. That is penetrating political insight. Thank you, BBC. Very cool. Democratic socialism is, of course, just, using legalized mob rule for the confiscation of property from other people. And Bernie Sanders says that it's time for Democrats to take Mamdani's message all over the country, reports Breitbart. Mamdani, who had the support, by the way, of billionaire heir Alex Soros, apparently is going to, in Bernie's words, take on the oligarchs. Yeah, it's just typical communist stuff here, you guys. And so I want to move along, though, to the exit polling breakdown, because that's where it starts to get really interesting here. So Mamdani's support came largely, it seems, from newer transplants to New York, as we talked about last week. If you can pull up the chart, not this one, the other one. Yeah. Exit polls illustrate that Mamdani lost among native New Yorkers, which is a little bit crazy to look at there. And Chris, you had a really good op-ed in Town Hall today on the exit polling. What do you make of this stuff?
What stood out to me was voters under 30 voted for him 80%. I think voters under 45, it was near 70%. 6 in 10 NYC renters voted for him. And 7 in 10 of the exit pollees said that their number one concern was the affordability, cost of living crisis. So I know we've kind of already touched upon that, but to his credit, he did make that the central issue of his campaign, and he just hammered it home time and time and time again. He has some really slick social media videos that he produced that resonated with young people especially. It just goes to show that the simple slogans that a socialist spouts, when you don't really think deeply about them and you just take them on their face, they sound really good. And, part of the problem is that we've got a generation of New Yorkers, and this is not just in New York. This is all over this country. And I'm a former teacher, so I know this. They're not being taught the history of communism, socialism. They're not being taught about the reality of free market capitalism or freedom in general. So they have a very warped view of communism. And that, I think, has led them to think, okay, well, it's not so bad. Maybe it, just didn't work out very well in the Soviet Union, but it's still a very, moral, fair, equitable ideology. And the way that he makes it sound so doable, they're falling for it. And obviously it's not going to work. We know why it's not going to work. But for these, ignorant voters, and I don't say that, with malice, they just literally don't know any better. They are voting for, someone who is going to make their lives 10 times worse, not 10 times better.
Yeah. And sorry, go ahead.
There was no one in this campaign who was bringing out any alternative economic program that at all. And so the problem that you have is one person is saying, you can't afford anything and it's these people's fault, and we're going to take money from them and give it to you because those people are evil and they're greedy, and so that's the way it's going to be. And we have that right because this is democratic and this is a democracy. And that's why we will have our socialism. The problem that you have here is that it's not a real fight, because all Cuomo was offering was the same thing that you already have. And there, what he was saying is that this chap will make it worse. But so what? They're willing to take that chance because they don't feel like they have a good situation. They don't feel like they have a chance to succeed. So they're willing to do that. It'll be different when there is some alternative that's offered that has some plausibility to it. So I think this is a really good test of what's going on in the Democrat Party and what's going on the left. I don't think it says much about what's going on in America, except insofar as the things that Barack Obama and Joe Biden fostered and put into place and rolled forward are having their effects. And New York has become a city of immigrants, very much so. Mamdani is right about that. And the question is, can this be rescued? Can New York ever be rescued, or will it simply have to depopulate to some degree, where the productive people are just scourged out, that they leave, and then what's left becomes so radically bad that change ultimately arrives simply through natural processes.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about this, I think last week or the week before. I actually am a native New Yorker. Now, I moved out when I was 8 years old, but I still have a lot of family in the New York area. And then that chart that we had up there before with native New Yorkers, people born in America and born in New York City, they were a minority of the electorate. Only 45% of people who voted were actually born native New Yorkers, and they went 12% plus 12% toward Cuomo. It should have been 90%. But I talked about this the other week. Look, apparently a majority, in fact, there you go. So that chart shows that 10 plus years is as far as it goes. So that's 37. So about half the electorate, half the people who voted on Tuesday for the mayor of New York City were not there during 9/11, let alone, have lived there their entire life. The city of New York is now being run by people who just got there. And I know it is supposed to be, it's technically illegal for non-citizens to vote in elections in the United States, including in New York City. But if you've been in the country for less than 5 years, how many of those people, showed up at the polls and voted when they're not actually citizens? We don't know. We will probably never know. But, the city of New York is being run by the people who don't know what New York was, and they're changing it. They're changing it into something else. It's basically now, I thought this was a little extreme when he said it. I was watching a Matt Walsh podcast the other day, and he said New York City is basically a foreign enclave inside the borders of the United States, that it is a foreign city. And that may be a little harsh, but the way the people voted in New York City kind of bears that out, because people who were born in New York City understand that as flawed and terrible as Cuomo is, and Curtis Sliwa, as well, really didn't have a chance, that there's a different outlook upon your city, your country, and in political philosophy and economics and all that stuff, if you were born here, than if you were not. So New York City has always been a city of immigrants. My family immigrated through New York City, but it's a completely different kind of immigrant city now.
Yeah, and we've said it before too, but I think it's important to bring this up again. It's really important, I think, if we're going to win on these issues, or we're going to start turning people away from this stuff, that it's not right to be dismissive of the concerns of the young people that are voting this way. Just saying, they're lazy and stupid and they got participation trophies is not going to cut it. Okay. First of all, who gave them participation trophies? They didn't spontaneously conjure those things. That kind of mindset is built into you over time. You're not born with it. But that's, not the point, really.
I think
real clear.
Well, I was
Yeah.
going to say, I think that New York City is also pretty representative of what's been happening, at least in my lifetime, with this, wealth inequality, Wall Street doing great, Main Street getting shafted.
Yeah.
And I think that since New York City is the financial capital of the world, and, we saw in the bailouts, we saw Occupy Wall Street, we saw all that stuff. This has been bubbling up under the surface for a very long time. I don't think it's happening in places, in rural places, because there's not that stark inequality that there is so in your face in New York City, where, a CEO of a bank, has a, $100 million penthouse, and the person who's driving the bus can barely afford their tiny little like apartment. So I think in a place like New York City, these issues are exacerbated for many reasons too. Like Jim was saying, New York City is pretty hardcore when it comes to affordable housing requirements, and not allowing permits, and these over licensing requirements and all this kind of stuff. So I think in a place like New York City, where the government intervention has already been so just so dramatic, the people think, well, the only solution is for more government intervention. And they almost can't even fathom the fact that, it's so hard for us to articulate this kind of argument. Actually, you'd be much better off if the government let you have just more freedom. And, it's sort of counterintuitive in a way, and it
Right.
like Sam said, this has been building, since the Obama years, with the life of Julia and all that kind of stuff, where you're not capable of making your own healthcare decisions, so allow us to do it for you. It's that mentality that I think has really taken hold in places like New York City. And once again, the kind of ignorant people, I don't mean that they are stupid. I mean that they are not being educated, in public schools, and especially with social media and the mainstream media clouding, their judgments on this. They think that this actually is a viable solution, when we all know that it is far from a viable solution.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what they hear. I'll tell you what they hear when you say things like, well, if there was less government, or if you just left it up to the free market. We know what we mean by that. And we know, the articulation of those points is a little bit deeper than what you can put on a bumper sticker. But what they hear, what they think of when they hear you say that is, oh, so we're just going to let these corporations that are just crushing us continue to do that with no holdbacks whatsoever then.
When in reality,
where they go,
big government and big corporations, are like two peas in a pod. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that's where their brains go, even if they're wrong. And Real Clear Politics
But that's
offers
because of the public school.
explanations.
But I think that a lot of that is because of the public schools situation, Linnea, where I witnessed this for many years, and it got so frustrating. I told myself, I don't want to be in this, this environment anymore, where I feel like I'm the only one who is offering truth and honesty and both sides of the story here. So I mean, I've written about this. I was persona non grata. Everyone looked at me like you are the one who is actually dispelling these myths that we are trying to implant in these students' minds, and they did not like me because of that.
Yeah.
I think it's important to consider the fact that many of the people who voted for Mamdani are immigrants who did not attend American schools. So it's a combination of things. And I think that New York City is going to become, and is certainly becoming, sort of like the Hong Kong to our China, only the opposite politically, where it is so different from the rest of the country, or the let's say the California to our China, but it's so different to the rest of the country, to the rest of the country, that it's really going to start to separate in terms of whether they even consider themselves to be Americans.
But it's not just New York City, Sam. It's also in Chicago. We've got Brendan Johnson, who is also basically a socialist. We've got the same thing happening, in cities across California. LA, obviously, Karen Bass is, basically a socialist. And although the socialist candidate lost in Minneapolis, the fact that the socialist candidate is even, within like a spitting distance of that race is just crazy to me. Katie Wilson, also in Seattle. I don't know if that race has been called yet, but she was neck and neck too. So I think this is sort of symbolic of the difference between the suburban and rural, mindset versus this, urban mindset, and especially on both coasts.
Yep.
That's absolutely true. You know, part of the progressive movement arises when America became industrialized and urbanized. As people moved off the farms and farms mechanized and they became more efficient and you had less labor in rural areas, America went from a nation of farms and villages to a nation of cities. Now, and politically, we went New Deal and lots of wars during that era. And then we suburbanized. And so what happened is you got a strange balance there where you had a very hard left approach coming from the cities, but it's moderated within the suburbs. So you had a sort of a balance there. It's interesting to look at what might happen with new technology and in communications and also in transportation. And given what happened during the lockdowns, where people became less attached to central cities, it's very possible that America could become more of a nation of villages again. If that were to happen, that will change our politics entirely, and I would say for the better. Because
Yeah,
exactly what you're talking about.
The free busing is going to save the cities. You're totally wrong about that.
I want to go to Ian on this, but first I want to read a little bit from what Real Clear Politics points out here. They say, even though all of his Marxist answers are wrong and immoral, Zoran laser focused on the issue that mattered most to voters, especially to the younger ones. Most young citizens have not benefited from the huge run-up in asset prices in recent years. Without substantial holdings of equities or real estate, they struggle to deal with sky-high costs for the staples of life. Even worse, the job market gets substantially tougher for young adults, adding even more angst. These voters correctly blame the Democrats for the pain of Bidenomics, but that answer has now shifted to Republicans, fair or not. Right now, per Tip Insights polling, only 24% of young adults rate Trump's performance as good or excellent on economics, and 54% rate it as poor or unacceptable. Mamdani smartly drove into this issue. All of his alleged solutions will only make inflation worse, of course. From the free public transit to lavish benefits for illegals. But regardless, he fixated on what matters to young voters. So they do blame Democrats, which is why they didn't turn out for Cuomo. They're desperate for something different than the boilerplate from either party, which have simply not delivered for them, they feel. And so radicalism is what you get. Ian, I'm sure that you're conservative. I'm conservative. You used to not be so conservative, but I'm sure you still have friends who are either kind of apolitical or maybe even a little bit on the left if they're not, too mad at you for being conservative now. But I imagine, a young apolitical person feels just swallowed up. He's living in New York. He feels swallowed up. He's drowning in debt. He's living in a shoebox with 3 other roommates. He lives in a Democrat city and he sees that it's bad. So he turns to Republicans and they say, well, what you should really do is move to a small town where there are fewer job opportunities and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're just not working hard enough. And then he sees someone like Mamdani who says, actually, there's an injustice and here are ways I will address those things. So what's more appealing to a, not well-educated possibly, or, overeducated, even worse, miserable, desperate person?
I think it's like beyond education. It's really who has something to offer. And I would just like to say it's easy to blame young people. I mean, I was previously a democratic socialist, right? It's easy to blame young people saying that, oh, you guys are all brainwashed. Your teacher is insane. Your classmates are Marxists. But then we got to recognize that despite all the brainwashing that is happening within public schools, the reality of the world is that it's getting harsher for us young people. So the real world is actually confirming all of these biases that we receive in schools. And then also I would like to add that, how we were talking about how Zohan and AOC, they're in the same boats. But I would also like to say that I think Zoran's a little different. Because Zoran, in a way, he revolutionized populist politics on the left, because when you think of AOC, you think of Hakeem Jeffries, the folks on the, what do they call it, the squad, right? They essentially have lost credibility in 2024 because Bernie, basically, he's just like, he's been exposed for long enough. He's been saying the word, he's been using the word oligarchy since like what, 1984. And then AOC, for those who know, she's just someone who runs her mouth. But really, Zoran, I think what he did so well, and Jim put it perfectly by comparing him to Obama, is that Zoran, his ability, like his charm and his ability to understand his voters. Like, we're not talking about a demographic enough. It's that the demographic who voted for Trump before and now are voting for Zoran. I know a lot of people who are like that. Like, they might not be like apolitical, they might not be totally left-leaning, and then they're open-minded, they're in the middle. They voted for Trump because under Biden it was terrible. But now, for Trump to say on Fox News the other day that the whole economy is doing well, like, as much as I love to wear my MAGA hat, I have to say that, like, big tech are really laying off people. Like, I'm very lucky Heartland Institute hired me, but so many of my friends, I can name more friends of mine who graduated, who are still looking for a job, than people who are like me, who are hired by Heartland. And then I even get to be on this podcast, which is awesome. But I just want to add that, like, Zoran, he really ran the perfect campaign. Like, I got to give it up to him. And Cuomo, his whole identity is that I am not Zoran. I am not crazy. But then young people hated the most. And if anything, the 2024 election proves it best. Like, Kamala for the whole time was saying, I am not Trump, vote for me, I am not Trump. But no one cares anymore when you are suffering. So yeah, as a young person, we got to realize that Zoran, he ran the perfect campaign. And then the reality, the American dream is getting harder for the younger generation.
The American dream is getting harder for the younger generation. As Sam knows, if you really want to go to the genesis of it, when we came off the gold standard and we just started printing money willy-nilly, the main driver of the inflation, whether it's housing inflation, energy inflation, all these, is that you've got the government borrowing tons of money and printing it to cover their, and it's happening at the local level in New York City. It's happening at the state level in New York. It's happening at the local level here in Chicago and at the state level here in Illinois. Obviously, the federal government's the only one that can print the money. But until we really just get to the bottom of that, that core, issue, we are really just fiddling with the edges here. Donald Trump obviously cannot turn inflation around and the cost of living around in 9 months. I mean, that's a joke. It's going to take years and years for his policies to actually, take root and for those to actually produce positive results. So, we've also got to be really, really patient here. And I think that the younger generation, and not to really, sit here and hate all day on the younger generation, but they are not patient. They are all about instant gratification. And, part of the American dream is about thinking long-term and saying, okay, I'm going to work real hard. I'm going to save. I'm going to live, within my means for many, many years in order to build up that nest egg to buy that house. A lot of young kids, and, I'm somewhat guilty of this myself. Not only can we not do that, but we just don't have that mentality right now.
The subject Ian brought up and that Chris has elaborated on is extremely important. Now, what I'm about to say is not going to win anybody any votes, but it's important for us in strategizing how to educate the public about the current situation, and in particular the affordability crisis. There's something called the Gini coefficient. It goes from 0 to 100, and it measures inequality in a society. In the United States, the Gini coefficient has been between 40 and 42 out of 100. So a very strong, very narrow band for 32 years. Inequality has not been rising in this country statistically.
It decreased during Trump's first term.
Right, it absolutely did. So something different is going on here. It's not strictly about the economy itself. There's something cultural going on here. And I think that that's a very interesting thing for us to pursue as a think tank and for all of us as voters and good Americans, which is that there's something cultural going on. And Mamdani, although he ran on a very strong, smart approach, affordability, just keep talking about that, there was also a very strong cultural element to it, and he did not back down from that, and he's made that very very explicit and powerful even in his acceptance speech. So one of the things that's been going on here is that these social issues have been rising in importance again, and I think that you certainly have to answer the affordability crisis, but we have to figure it out first. Figure out exactly what's going on when the statistics don't show that there is, in fact, a big increase in economic inequality in the country. What is happening there? Is it just New York City, Northern Virginia, places where people get laid off? As the Tip O'Neill said in the 1980s, all politics is local. And he was referring to congressional races and even presidential contests. If that's the case, then that's something where you're going to have to do it on a case-by-case basis. You're going to have to get some people in New York who understand what's really going on there and will work to find solutions to it. But on the national level and on the level of who controls the Senate, who controls the House of Representatives, it's going to be very different when you have people in Iowa. And Chris mentioned the rural people who don't see as much inequality as you do in New York City. How much of this is perception? How much of this is reality? What is reality that is not good? We need to fix, but you need to figure out exactly what is wrong before you can attend to it.
Sam,
so I think that this is a very interesting and important subject.
All right,
Sam,
hang on. I want to get Ian. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, so something I would like to add is that I forgot to mention when I said Zoran, he revolutionized this extremist politics, is that the element Sammy said is missing is populist politics. And he took it on to the next level. And then more than that is that actually, this is going to sound kind of crazy, but Zoran, like out of everyone in the Democratic Party, he's the least annoying to me. Just because he's not like, when you think of typical Democrats, they think of a Trump supporter like me, they're going to be like racist, sexist, all of those rants, right? But Zoran, he does not do that. Like he's not condescending. And he actually, when he went on Flagrant, which is a very big podcast hosted by Andrew Schultz, a comedian, all young people watch it. When he went on that podcast, and just a heads up, everyone on that panel voted for Trump. And he wasn't like being very judgmental. He wasn't trying to say that, yeah, like you guys are wrong, right? Ha ha ha. He was saying, I understand why you voted for Trump. I understand why we lost your support. And I think that's something he did so well. And I just think that it's this time, like we as Republicans, and then of course Democrats, like people in politics, we have to sometimes take accountability. Like you can't just blame voters for voting for the crazy candidates. Like if they're so crazy, then how come they're not voting for you, right? And I would just like to say that there's like the rights right now is not very united. And then I think this election result is a result of like very motivated left-leaning voters, and then like a kind of disgruntled Republican base. And just like Chris said it, like a lot of us, we want to see instant gratification. We want to see like mass deportations. We want to see all of this just like happen by Donald Trump's magical pen that he signs executive order with. But yeah, we got to be more patient. But at the same time, Republicans got to reflect on, have they really been keeping in touch with the populace, with the public? Because Zoran did that so well. And then as much as I think he's a villain, he deserved to win.
Yeah, well, I don't, yeah. So Real Clear points out two other points that I really want to grab real quick here. And that is basically what you just said, which is that one, he's massively charismatic and he has media skills, which is more than AOC, more than any of those people. It might be trained. He might, have taken 1 million speaking and acting classes and stuff, but it doesn't matter because it comes across as normal. It comes across as, genuine, even if it's evil, right? And they also point out that he had an incredible moment during the July debate when the candidates were asked where they're going to visit after they're elected mayor of New York City internationally to give their support to international causes. All of them said they'd go to Israel and Ukraine and stuff like that. And Mamdani was the only one who said he was not going to go anywhere. He was going to stay in New York. Think about that for a second. I mean, that's, wow.
Yeah.
Totally playing to the populists. I mean, that's an extremely popular position for young people right now, is the non-interventionism at the very least, even, almost isolationist in some cases. No wonder he got the young vote with moments like
Linnea,
that.
I think we've also got to address the fact that he was anti-Israel and basically pro-Palestine and pro-Hamas, and that unfortunately is a very trendy thing in New York City these days. But just if I could go back to what Sam was saying earlier about the culture, in New York City, and I'm going to paint with a broad brush here, the breakdown of the family is a big problem. And one of the things that happens when you have a breakdown of the family, at epidemic levels like it is in New York City, people rely on government. They don't rely on each other. And that's a huge reason why I think as someone like Mamdani is able to sell the socialist snake oil, because people think it's like, I'm all on my own. I have no one I can count on. I don't have neighbors I can trust and that can help me out if I need, something, or family I can trust and help out if I need something. But the government, they're always there. They always will, have my best interest at heart. And we know that is the complete opposite.
Yeah, I want to, Ian, I was very happy that Ian complimented me, that I said something that resonated with him. And I want to return the compliment because Ian did the same thing. In fact, he stepped all over my notes. I had all these things I was going to say. But so maybe just to wrap up this little section of the thing, Kamala ran on, I'm not Trump, stop Trump. Biden did that too. I'm the only guy who can beat Trump. Mamdani, like it or not, gave people a positive reason to vote for him, not just against somebody else. Trump did that, of course, too. In fact, in 2024, Trump got more minority voters, Democratic voters, and young voters, especially young men of all races, because he focused on the failures of the Biden administration, especially economically. And so now the economy may be getting better, as Chris alluded to, but people don't feel it. They really don't. And it may take a while for Trump's economic plan to bear fruit. I mean, the tariffs could be in jeopardy. They just talked about that in the Supreme Court yesterday, I believe. But as Ian pointed out, young people don't feel like the American dream is available to them anymore, and haven't for a very long time. And they also feel, not without justification, that the economy is rigged against them, that they're not, and they're not wrong to feel that way. I mean, try to convince them, and you can't, because it just hasn't worked for people under the age of 30 or even 40. And so that slowly starts to burn and build up resentment in the kind of thing where you see what Mamdani said in that victory speech, where there was a lot of anger still, and there's enemies to target in that speech. All of that is part of this whole thing. And this is, I wouldn't say dangerous politics, but people who don't want socialism need to wake up and start messaging toward people who have legitimate reasons to think the economy is rigged against them. That if they don't do that, they're going to continue to lose. Again, Mamdani gave people a reason to vote for him. It wasn't just stop Trump, kill Trump, literally, or I'm not Trump. Trump also ran on that. But in the midterms that are coming up, if the Republican Party led by Donald Trump does not come up with good, legitimate, positive reasons for people to extend his power in the second half of his term, they are going to get crushed by the messaging that Mamdani has just showed the Democrats is the victory or the pathway to success.
Jim, but it is dangerous because it's pitting one group against another, and it's saying everything's a zero-sum game, and the reason you're not getting ahead is because of them. I reject that in full. And what's so great about free market capitalism is it's a win-win. Right. There is no me going to Starbucks and buying a cup of coffee. No one's saying you must go do that. I'm choosing to do that, and those are two mutually beneficial transactions. But when he is saying, no, actually Starbucks is, is all out to get you, and everything is like allied against you, I think that sets into place in these people's minds a really dark, a dark environment where they think the only thing I can do is have this, this giant transformation, this socialist, system put into place, because the capitalist system, although I would argue we are far from a free market capitalist society, generally speaking, it's a rigged system. So I think that as much as I understand the populist bent to all this stuff, I still think that the underlying solution is to get back to free market policies, to allow people to engage in businesses, to not have these permitting and these licensing burdens, and to literally have the federal government just get out of people's lives, revive federalism, and obviously stop the borrowing and spending craziness.
All right, I want to jump to Ian here because he unfortunately has to go pretty soon here, because it is 3 a.m. where he is, and he was so kind to come on the show and talk with us on an issue that really matters to his generation a lot. So I wanted to hand it back to you for a minute here, Ian.
Yeah, thank you for getting me on. And then one message I want all young people to hear is that, like, now the American dream is getting harder. So go to advisorymetal.com. It's climate realism show /advisorymetal.com, right? And thank you for getting me on. And then it's great to share. Yeah, climaterealismshow.com /metals. So if you don't want inflation to be taking away your money, put your money in advisorymetal.com. And thank you, everyone.
Or go in a time machine and take Nixon's decision to take us off the gold standard out of this historical record.
Yeah, I like
True.
that too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
I'm working
Ian,
on
I
that.
didn't know you were gonna. I didn't know that you actually had a advice. You wanted to do the plug there, but that works for me. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for being on. Okay, I'm gonna move us along here. I know we could talk in circles on this stuff forever, but I wanted to point out real quick some of the other elections that went on this week. Virginia, New Jersey, Democrats won elections there. Jay Jones won his AG race, despite the awful comments that he made about wishing death on his political opponents' families. So make that of what you will. And Abigail Spanberger won the Virginia gubernatorial race, and Mickey Sherrill won New Jersey's. So I guess there's kind of a bright side, which is that Frey won in Minneapolis over that Somalian guy. So I guess that's good. Blue states are completely out of their minds right now. It's not a surprise that these blue states held their positions, but in all of these places, exit polling showed that economics was the main driver. Breitbart reports economic issues emerge as the most important for voters across Virginia, New Jersey, and New York City. Almost half of voters identified the economy as the most important issue in Virginia. 2 in 10 said that healthcare was. Only 1 in 10 said immigration and education were important, while less than 1 in 10 said crime. And this is for Virginia, you guys. So while most said the economy in the state this is the part that's weird though. Most said the economy in the state is excellent or good. Very few said that they were getting ahead, about 1 in 10. So that's weird. They think their state economy is doing good or great even, but it was the number one reason why they voted Democrat. That sounded to me like their Republican candidates were just abysmal at messaging, or were running on like pessimism or something. I'm not entirely sure. So we'll talk about that for a second here. And then for New Jersey, ABC exit polls said that nearly 4 in 10 said taxes were the most important issue facing New Jersey. And then they went and voted Democrat, while another roughly third of voters said the economy was. Fewer named healthcare, immigration, or crime. Democrat candidate Mickey Sherrill had majority support from those who said the state of the economy was good, while Republican candidate Citrelli, I said it right the first time. Okay, won the bulk of those who said it was not doing well. So, Sam, since I heard your voice there, pessimism seems to not be a very good way to drive your messaging. Why are Republicans like this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation there. I too picked up on that situation in Virginia where they seem to be saying, yeah, the economy's great and we need to get better. I don't get it. Well, I think that first of all, Winsome Sears, she's presumably seems to be a very nice person, very likable, but she was just an awful candidate. I mean, she wasn't even, I don't think she was as good as Curtis Sliwa, frankly. She just was very uninspiring. She was winsome. She was very likable, but she didn't seem to have any solutions for the problems that people in Virginia, and in particular Northern Virginia, were encountering. So, and interestingly enough, Spanberger ran really, she didn't run as a big communist or socialist or anything, but she ran very strongly on those social issues from the left. She was very, say we're going to get the schools back to the to the time before the present governor, Republican governor, and we're going to get boys back in the girls' locker rooms and bathrooms and the like, and that seemed an odd choice, and yet it looks like it tended to drive people into their camp. It seems unlikely that that's true. So I really just think that Sears didn't seem to have answers to the questions that the voters had. Up in New Jersey, the Republican candidates, Citarelli, I think it is. He had been getting closer and closer. This is like the third time he's run, and he had been getting closer and closer to winning. And then this time he just collapsed. I suspect that it's partly because people had heard his shtick, let's say, and just were tired of it and didn't think it was relevant to the issues of the day. But so I think in big part that this is just the candidates that ran. And that was who you could get in these states that are pretty blue. I mean, Virginia is pretty blue. And, until Youngkin won the governorship, everybody was writing that state off just a couple of years ago, a few years ago. So it's a blue state. New Jersey's a blue state. They really couldn't get candidates who had a strong message and who had the kind of charisma that Mamdani clearly has. I think Mamdani is a lot like Trump. Even if you don't like the things that he's saying he's going to do, you feel like, well, he cares and he's on my side. And then if you think he's not on your side, you very strongly think he's not on your side. So I think that these are basically blue states and a big blue city, and the national implications of this are yet to be seen, and I don't think they're very great. But I do think that it's just you couldn't get very strong candidates this time around because they looked at those states and said, forget it, it's not worth it. The Republicans didn't put much money in them. So we'll find out what the meaning of it is, like I say, when you actually have a debate. But Sears and Citarelli really weren't very strong candidates, so there's no debate there.
I followed both these races very closely. And I'll start with the Virginia race. So Abigail Spanberger comes across as a soccer mom. She's supposedly a moderate. She's not a moderate. And Sam, although she didn't fully endorse the trans stuff, she did a very good job of avoiding those questions and averting the questions because she cannot just come out and clearly say, like Len Youngkin, girls should play against girls, boys should play against boys. Boys should not be in girls' bathrooms. She cannot say that. Okay. It's also interesting because although the Virginia, gubernatorial race went to Spanberger, she also has control of the House and the Senate there. Glenn Youngkin never did. So in Virginia, it's usually been a divided government for decades. So Virginia could actually, go pretty hardcore blue now that they've got the trifecta there. Also, obviously, the government shutdown and the amount of federal employees in Northern Virginia make that, a blue state. It's no longer a purple state. In New Jersey, so Linnea, one of the big exit poll responses was that voters in New Jersey were apoplectic about their skyrocketing energy bills. Yet anyone with, half of a brain would say, Mickey Sherrill's going to make that 10 times worse. And everything that Chitterelli said, he actually did make energy a big part of his campaign. He talked about getting out of the regional greenhouse gas initiative. He talked a lot about the solar and wind mandates. Although he was an all of the above guy, which I am not, he at least was talking about, hey, this subsidizing green energy stuff is really why your power bills are through the roof the past few years. Yet New Jersey voters said, we're going to go with the woman who's going to make that worse. I just cannot wrap my head around that. It literally makes no sense. Trump lost New Jersey by 6 points to Harris, but he lost it to Biden by 16 points. So although New Jersey might be trending sometimes a little more in the red direction, it's nowhere near a red state. However, this is the first time that they've had a 3 times in a row a Democratic governor, which is really strange because going back to, they said 1970, they've gone back and forth, 2 terms Democrat, 2 terms Republican, Chris Christie being the most recent one of those, although, he was not exactly the most Republican of Republicans. So, what happened in those states is you had the voters say, we're concerned about our electricity costs. We're concerned about these other things. Yet they voted for the person who is in the party that is responsible for those problems in the first place. I personally cannot understand that. I really thought that Chitterelli would win in New Jersey. I really did. I thought that there would also be a boomerang effect to the Mamdani election in New York City, where the New Jerseyites would say, hey, wait a second. We probably came to New Jersey because we wanted to escape New York, yet they're doing the same thing there, just a lighter version of it. So I think, it just defies common sense, because if these voters were voting, based on their pocketbooks, they would have voted for Winsome Sears. They would have voted for Jack Chitterelli, but they did not do that. Now, the media is making big hay about this is the first time that, New Jersey, or not New Jersey, but Virginia has a woman governor. So take that for what it is. But it's just these results are very confounding.
Chris, was Republican turnout low in those 2 states?
I don't know the answer to that.
Jim, I want to get to you.
Generally speaking, the 2025 off-year elections, the turnout tends to be lower. But in New York City, surprisingly, it was the highest it's been since 2000. So that was very unexpected, actually.
Yeah. Well, I used to live in Virginia, as a matter of fact, for about a decade. So I've lived in 2 of these places. Virginia has a 1-term limit on governor, which is very odd. So I think that Youngkin, if he was up for re-election, I think if you're gonna have term limits, at least give a guy 2 shots. Yeah. But if you're gonna, if he was running for re-election as an incumbent, I think he would have walked away with this race, actually, because he won the governorship the first time, running against the very agenda that Spanberger was advocating, including the trans stuff. That was the thing that turned the election for him in the first time. There was a lot of talk about New Jersey becoming more and more MAGA country, but especially because of, Donald Trump is a man culturally of that area. But I guess not. The MAGA people didn't want to come out and elect themselves a Republican governor. I think we've all mispronounced his name. I'm just going to call him Citronella because it doesn't matter anymore what his name is, because he has no political future in New Jersey. Yeah, I know, that's pretty
mean.
Cool.
That's
pretty
really mean.
That is really
that
mean.
Might be the meanest thing anyone said on the show.
That takes some doing. Anyway, so to me, the most troubling thing was that Jay Jones was elected Attorney General, statewide office in Virginia. He openly fantasized about having his political opponents murdered, to have the children of his political opponents die in the arms of their mother because they didn't see gun issues the way he did. And when called out on this, he doubled and tripled down on it. And the voters of Virginia didn't care.
And it wasn't close.
They thought he was worthy of it, and it wasn't close. That's the thing about all these elections. It wasn't close.
Yeah.
The whole talk about, hey, Citronella's coming up on the outside, and no, he wasn't. He didn't even get close. Nobody got close. And again, I think the messaging was bad. Winsome Sears was not a strong candidate. She had a great performance in her debate with Spamberger when she challenged her. Are you telling me you cannot denounce publicly right here in front of everybody that your AG, your ticket mate, wants me dead? And Spamberger just sat there stone-faced silent, even kind of smirked. That should be political death for anybody. I don't care. That race should have been a lot closer just for that, and it wasn't. Look, Northern Virginia, the shutdown really hurt the Republican Party in Virginia, especially. All these people are laid off, and that's why Chuck Schumer had no interest in breaking the shutdown, because he wanted it to help in Virginia. Absolutely 100% true. But one of my favorite maps after the 2024 election, it was on the New York Times. It had like every county in America. Every single county was more red than it was in the previous election. Right now, another popular map today is that in New Jersey, California, and Virginia, every county, every district was voting more Democrat than they did just in the previous election. So, we're still very much a divided country. And if you have a good message, you can turn them your way. And if you don't have a message at all, you're going to get smoked.
Keep in mind, though, that these off-year elections are somewhat gimmicky.
I know.
Because you're not getting a huge turnout. So, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily bode poorly for what's going to happen in 2026.
I fully agree with Chris. You don't win a fight if you don't fight.
Yep. And people who are well educated on the dangers of socialism are probably feeling pretty unsafe or unstable amid the growth of socialist ideology in this country. The banks are sometimes not on our side, pushing ESG and supporting credit score types, like social credit score type systems. Investing in gold won't stop socialists from wanting to come and take your money, but it can make it harder for them to do so. At In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals over all of those other guys. And that's because we know that the person running the place is the best of the best. A great friend of Liberty, Ira Bershadsky, owns and is the managing member of Advisor Metals. He has decades of experience in precious metals and is the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. What does all that mean for you? Well, it means that everything Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be factual. There are no sketchy sales pitches or baits and switches. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there is full transparency, which is too lacking in too many places nowadays. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that you can hide from Zoran Mamdani, that is easier to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He will make it easy for you. Please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure that you let him know that we sent you. That helps us as you are helping your financial future by diversifying with precious metals from Advisor Metals. Thank you, guys.
The queen of segues has spoken again.
Yes, we are doing a good job. Anyway, so yeah, we're going a bit later than late today because we haven't even gotten to our fourth topic, but we are now. This is this topic here. So the what now? We have socialism rising. It's no longer taboo in any political party, especially not for the left, to just be openly socialist. We are going to see more and more openly communist, like just straight up communist people as well running for office. And they're going to win elections with Democrats. I guarantee it. So this is one of the purposes of Justin and Donald's Emerging Issues Center, you guys. So how do we properly reach people, show them that socialism is evil, but also promote a better way that isn't just repeating the same bumper sticker stuff that the GOP has been repeating for decades, right? Turning Point does a good job of beginning the process. One of the worst parts of the loss of Charlie Kirk right now, especially this week, is that he didn't blame people for feeling despondent and left behind or ignored in politics. And we can't do that either. So Heartland did a poll with Rasmussen a few months ago asking young voters who they'd like to see win in 2028. 53% of likely voters aged 18 to 39 said they'd like to see a Democratic Socialist candidate win the 2028 presidential election, and 76% said they somewhat or strongly agree that major industries like healthcare, energy, big tech should be nationalized to give more control and equity to people. That includes a shocking 35% of respondents who said that they previously voted for Trump in 2024. All right, so why did Trump gather such an odd coalition? And as we said, I think a couple times during the show, it's because he was different. He offered a message that bucked, the Republican norms and refuted Democrats at the same time. The same is true for the socialists that are running right now, who see Democrats as weak and ineffective, the same way that MAGA people see Republicans as weak and ineffective. So I wanted to either open it to the group or one of the areas that I saw someone actually offer a solid policy prescription to issues that I think we would support sorry, I've lost my notes here. I've lost my Mr. DeCoucy over on Twitter said that Zoomers and millennials are blaming capitalism or whatever for the fact that they're massively in debt for university degrees that they discovered don't have anywhere near the earning power they were promised, when they should be angry at the schools and universities who convinced them that their degree was a road to a wealthy and secure life. The same degrees, the same universities that more than likely convinced them that capitalism was the root of their problems to begin with. We need to strip universities of their tax-free nonprofit status and force them to back student loans using their endowments. A lot of smaller schools will close, but if sucking at the government teat to churn out people getting unneeded degrees was the only thing keeping them open, they need to close. So thoughts on this one? Sam, I want to go to you first.
Thanks, Linnea. The problem that we have here is that it's a fundamental loss of fundamental loss of values that reflect our country. In particular, Mamdani and the left are all talking about achieving the American dream. Mamdani was very clear about that affordability and housing, those are American dream issues. But you don't just get the American dream by being handed it. And you only get the American dream by following the American way, which is ownership, private property rights, hard work, doing the right thing, taking care of yourself and your family and your neighbors. That's the American way. And the American way is what leads to the American dream. You can't have a shortcut there. So when you say that, well, all the millionaires and billionaires and all the people and all the other people who create jobs in New York City will leave, that is the danger. And that is what we have to worry about for the New Yorkers whom we care about as Americans. So the problem that we have here is that we've lost sight of the American dream. And I think Chris would certainly be able to speak to this in his capacity as a former educator and a very strong analyst of American education. But I don't think it's just education. I think it has a lot to do with the way the right has characterized things, which is free markets will solve all the problems. And then when they don't, they say, well, it's your own fault. What we need to do is we need to get back to the fundamentals of what made this country great. And this was the greatest country in the world. And we can be that. We can resume that condition. But it's going to be all about reestablishing the American way. And until we do that, and until we convince people that that's what's really needed, then we're going to have this continual disturbance and enormous diversion from the center, that there will be no center in this country. So we've got to reestablish the American way and connect that to the American dream.
I think it's like a 2-track thing here. So I think in the short term, we're already starting to do some of the things that need to be done. I think that bringing American manufacturing back home is a big part of this, because that's going to create lots and lots of good paying career jobs for young people. Linnea, you mentioned how for generations now we've told people, go to college, get an education, and somehow you'll make a lot of money. That has not worked out for so many reasons, because first of all, the government has gotten involved in student loans, and it's just totally gummed up that system. But I think that we need to just get back to some fundamentals here. So reshoring jobs, back in America, that's not going to happen overnight. That's going to take a very long time to build those factories and all those kinds of things. But that's happening now. But you got to be patient with that. I think that some of the other things that the Trump administration is doing will also play out over time. I think that energy is a big one. You're not just going to get, super low energy prices with the, snap of a finger. It's going to take a couple of years probably to do that. So I think on those things, you just got to be patient here. Also, I wish that the federal government would stop borrowing and printing so much money, because that would have a huge impact on people's, discretionary spending and such. On the other side of things, in the long term, I think that the schools have got to take this seriously. Florida passed a law that requires their public schools to actually teach what happened in communist countries, why communism is not all it's cracked up to be, and why free market capitalism is actually a more moral, fair, and better system. But I'll go back to the family breakdown and the lack of virtue. So I think socialism it thrives when you have a populace that is not as virtuous, as they should be, because they are then, more easily susceptible to the siren, call of socialism, which is it's you versus you. It's, it's all rigged. Versus, when you have an enlightened and a virtuous society, the values that go along with that of working hard, sharing when necessary, helping others when they're in need, that overtakes that call to have the government do all that stuff for you. So I think these are, there's the policy side, there's the culture side, there's the family side, there's the education side. And just picking one is not going to solve this. We need a holistic approach to all these things, and it's going to take generations. It's not going to happen in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, and I want to address some of the things in our commenters too. It's always, whenever the topic of the education situation, especially universities, come up, it's always like, oh, well, you shouldn't have gotten a degree in underwater basket weaving. Correct. You probably shouldn't be getting a degree in underwater basket weaving, but people are graduating with engineering degrees and not getting jobs right now. Computer engineering, mathematicians, physicists, all the people that John Z is listing off right now, they are not being able to find jobs. So it's not just, people are getting, 18th century French poetry degrees, and then they're surprised that the only place that they can find work is at the university or in a museum or something. It's people with, what you would call a real degree. And then I would also say, trade school is a great thing, but we can't have all the lawyers be Democrats. we can't have all the academics be Democrats. That would be terrible.
I think they already are.
No, but Linnea, so when you look at the financialization sector of this economy, and the fact that so many people are making money by making tons of money by just moving papers back and forth, they're not really adding value to this economy. So I know this is a little bit old fashioned per se, but I think that it is true. You need to have, a manufacturing base. You need to have, factories. You need to have those types of jobs. And in the 1980s and 1970s, when we started to say, no, we don't need those things, we can do that over in China and then buy the cheap stuff, that has led to the hollowing out of the middle class. That has led to the Rust Belt states. And those people, they're saying, we have no opportunity. And they cannot go and go to Harvard and get a master's degree in business administration and go and play the commodities markets and somehow make $1 billion. So I think we do need to get back to some of the basics that in this country. And instead of looking down upon those people, which I think a lot of like Mamdani and those people do, they look down at the Heartland. They look down at the flyover country. It's stupid rubes. No, those are the people that really make this country go. And we should actually have the utmost respect for those people.
Yeah, and that's definitely not what the point that I was trying to make was that, not everybody, the point is not everybody needs to go to college. It shouldn't be a situation where everyone needs to go and get a university degree in order to get a good job. There are plenty of people for whom trade school is a good idea, but you don't want to tell people everybody should go to trade school instead. We're just going to do the opposite of what we've been doing since the 80s, which is telling everyone that they need a college degree. But now what we're going to say is nobody should get a college degree. Everybody should go and do, very worthwhile, very good and important and dignified work in the trades. And then what we're left with is an academic class that's even worse than the Democrat-dominated academic class that we have now. That's my concern. Yeah, there's also nothing wrong with going to law school. It's okay. Like, we don't have to be enforcing this stuff. One of the things that drove me out of, among other things, but one of the things that drove me out of working for the major oil company that I was working for was the company made it so that in order to get an entry-level job that people used to be able to have with just the GED or even no GED, they made it so that you needed a bachelor's in order to get that job while I was there. So people who I was coworkers with, people who were my supervisors, who did not have a high school diploma, who were some of the smartest people I've ever met, if they got laid off during a downturn, the company wasn't going to hire them back because they didn't have a college degree, even if they have 30 years experience in the offshore oil industry. That needs to stop. But that's being driven by degree inflation and also corporate culture that's pushing this stuff. It's crazy from top to bottom.
And automation and AI are going to make this 10 times worse in the years to come.
Yeah. Let me weigh in here. I mean, just real quick. I know Bob Johnson. He's an engineer. He's a friend of the Heartland Institute. He's always watching these shows. Hello there, Bob. He mentions that if you have an engineering degree and you can't get a job, part of that problem is because of the H-1B visa program that Donald Trump has talked about reforming. So that will be good. But look, this is about whether wither the appeal of socialism as a message, right? Yeah. And it's an appealing message because of the crony capitalism that we have in America instead of free market capitalism. When Bernie and AOC and Zoran Mamdani criticize the oligarchs, it resonates with many people, especially young people who don't feel that they can participate in the modern economy unless they have some sort of inside knowledge or some connections or something, but they can't. They were told to do all of these things that, we sell the American dream. We sell free market capitalism. We don't have real free market capitalism in this country. And when young people are trying to build a life for themselves, you're trying to sell what we need is maximum freedom and maximum economic freedom and personal freedom. And and they feel like doing that, playing by those rules, has not gotten them anywhere. When somebody comes in and says, that's right, the system is rigged against you, I will take care of you. That's like that clip from Mamdani's victory speech, basically saying there's no problem too big for government to solve and no concern you have that we won't take notice of. You have to understand, as much as we disagree with that and think that down that road is danger, not just economically, but personally and in many other ways, it resonates with people who feel they've been left behind in this economy and have felt this way for a long time, for a very long time. And this message is something we are going to have to counter, and freedom-loving people are going to have to counter with something a little bit more detailed or nuanced than just freedom is the answer. That was an easier message and a simple one to sell. Milton Friedman, one of the heroes of the Heartland Institute, used to be able to sell that message on the freaking Phil Donahue show because there was a foil against it called the Soviet Union, which was a complete economic basket case. Young people today, anybody under the age of 40, doesn't remember or probably even learned about the Soviet Union. All they know is that they've tried to do what they can to play by the rules, and they have not gotten anywhere. In fact, they feel like all the other generations before them have been able to experience the American dream, and I never really will. And when there's enormous numbers of people that disaffected by the system that they have been brought up in, that's where socialism and worse becomes a lot more appealing. So we're going to see more of it. We're going to see more of this kind of messaging, and I think we're going to see more electoral victories for people with this message until the freedom side comes up with something that really matters and can affect people's lives on the ground. It's really desperate out there economically for a lot of people in their 20s and 30s.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, that's one of the reasons, you guys, why you should stick around and pay attention to what the Heartland Institute is doing, especially our Emerging Issues Center and the Socialism Research Center. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We all were worried, what if we are going to win on the climate issue? What else could we have to worry about after that? Well, it turns out we've got quite a bit of a beast ahead of us to slay, you guys. That is all the time we have, unfortunately, today. We went extra long over. So thank you, everyone, for sticking with us. We are live every single week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Jim, what have you got for the audience today?
We got the Climate Realism Show on this very same channel Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be fantastic, so we hope to see you there.
Chris?
Heartland.org. Please go visit.
Sam?
Heartland.org and stkarnick.substack.com.
Awesome. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave a review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists here, and also to Ian, who is no longer online because he is sleeping. But thank you guys all for sticking with us, as I said before, and we will see you again next week.